here I am in front of my raised gardens, and I'm just going to show you what's going on here. At the moment, in this tremendous heat, I'm very, very fortunate that I have a tree shading the gardens. So the tomatoes and the zucchini and the various different vegetables and herbs are actually doing well. They're not wilting under this tremendous heat and strong sun that we're experiencing in the middle, well, actually early part of July. So let's take a look at what's going on here. So this is my first raised garden. It gets the majority of shade throughout the day, but it's thriving nevertheless. I had an issue with my spinach. It actually did something called bolting, and it bloomed and went to seed far too quickly early in the season. So I haven't really had much of a harvest from my spinach plants, and it happened in both of my raised gardens. And those are things that you learn over time as you're experimenting with working with different plants. But here are my greens. I have some great lettuce right here, and kale. And you're not going to see it very well because it's highly shaded by a tomato plant, but I have some arugula growing back here underneath the tomato plants. I've also got some thyme growing right here, and this is parsley, and I have to do a little bit of weeding to free that up. Tucked in here is a basil plant, which is being rapidly eaten, probably by some flea beetles. So I'll have to look at that a little bit further. And tucked in underneath all of this are some carrots growing in this one quadrant in the raised garden. You can see that my tomato plants have completely taken off, and I do have some blooms happening, which is exciting because that means I'm going to have some fruit coming from this. And I just want to shift around to my zucchini so that you can get a look at this as well. You can see there's lots of blooms on the zucchini plant in the background there, so it's going to produce a tremendous amount of zucchini too. And in this same garden, believe it or not, I have more. I have peppers growing, and here they are here. So what I've been doing, instead of closing the covers on these gardens, I'm keeping them open now because the plants are maturing. I water nightly. I've been putting eggshells on the soil to help with boosting the nutrients in the soil. And I've been using supports and strings to help support the plants as they're growing. And I'm really kind of surprised and excited all at the same time that I've actually been able to produce this much in these raised beds. This is my second raised bed. It gets a lot more sunshine throughout the day. But again, there doesn't seem to be a tremendous difference in the size of the plants between the two raised beds. Nevertheless, I've got 2 zucchini plants in here for future reference. I'm going to scale that back to 1 in a raised garden. As well with tomato plants, I think I'll keep it to 2 next season. But what I had to do was I had probably about 6 plants in each raised bed when I started out, and I had to transplant tomato plants, which was a little touch and go in the beginning, but they came back just fine after about a week. They were happy. So in this garden again, I have a few other variations, but here's my arugula. It's going great guns. And then I have parsley beside it. I've planted some marigolds, but they haven't bloomed yet because I planted them from seed, so it's going to take them time to produce flowers. I've got some coriander in there and some dill. My kale is doing really well, but again, my spinach, it didn't fare very well this season. It bolted, so it bloomed too soon. My lettuce, and then I have a mustard plant here, and it's been eaten quite a bit. And what I've discovered is the flea beetle was eating my lettuce and my arugula, but then it took to the mustard plant because it liked it a lot better. So this, unfortunately, has been happening with the mustard plant, but it's kind of a sacrifice plant at this point. The flea beetle is munching on my kale as well, but not as much. And the mustard plant is sidetracking or deterring the pests from choosing some of the other greens that I have here in the garden. There isn't a lot of room for weed growth, which is good news, and the pests have been reasonably manageable up to this point in time. So this is my overflow garden. When I realized I'd planted way too many tomato plants, I set this one up and I transplanted tomato plants from my raised gardens and about 3 pepper plants as well, and I placed them here. I did dig the bed down and I added vegetable soil into it for the benefit of these plants, and they're thriving and doing quite well actually, which I'm very excited about. One of the things I've also done, which I want to point out to you, was, and this came up in one of the earlier segments where it talked about making sure when you water that the depth of your water goes down relatively deep so the roots can reach down to it. So I've put these, and I'm trying to give you a good picture, I've put these plastic tubes in that are hollow on both ends, and in the evenings when I water, I pour the water directly into these tubes, which directs it down under the soil, which gives the plants a lot more to draw from at the root level, which is going to be beneficial for these plants. And as you can see, I'm going to have flowers soon on the tomato plants, and lots of tomatoes, which I love because I like to can them. I do stewed tomatoes for over the winter for the sauces that I like to make. So this gives you an idea of how much shade. It's about almost 11:30, almost 12 o'clock in the day, noon, and my gardens are relatively well shaded for this time of the day, which is actually working to their advantage, and that's why the plants are thriving as well as they are. In this series of The Amateur Gardener, we're going to spend some time talking about soil. It's not glamorous or exciting, but it is the foundation of a great garden and an excellent harvest. Soil is comprised of 3 different types. First there's clay soil, then there's sandy soil, and then there's loam soil. To describe the differences, clay soil, if you pick it up in your hand and it feels heavy and sticks together, it probably has a lot of clay in it. Clay soil has the advantage of holding on to nutrients well, but it also holds on to water, sometimes too much. Since it has such poor drainage, clay soil can easily become waterlogged and drown the roots of your plants. Sandy soil, if you pick that up and it feels grainy and falls apart, it's probably sandy. With sandy soil, water will quickly drain right through, which means that you won't need to worry about your plants getting waterlogged, but you will have a harder time keeping them watered. Also, as the water pours through your soil, it'll wash away a lot of the nutrients, making it harder to keep your plants fed. Loam soil is the ideal soil. Most plants would like your soil to stick together when squeezed and fall apart when poked. You're looking for loam. Loam is a combination of sand, clay, and other materials that allow water, nutrients, and air to circulate easily to your plant roots. If your soil is sandy, you'll need to add compost or peat moss to help your soil hold water better. For existing gardens with sandy soil, mulch your garden with 2 inches of compost every year, and be sure to put compost in every hole when you plant. If your soil is clay, you'll need to add compost, sand, or gravel to help the water drain better. Be sure to use sand and gravel made for soil amendments, often called sharp sand, builder's sand, or sharp gravel. Beach sand may include salt, which can be bad for your plants, and sandbox sand can be too fine to help with drainage. Treat existing gardens with clay soil the same as sandy soil. Mulch your garden with 2 inches of compost every year, and be sure to put compost in every hole when you plant. We've now learned about the different soil compositions. Throughout the growing season and into the next season, you need to find ways to replenish the soil because your mature plants are going to be drawing nutrients from that soil every day. There are different ways that you can tackle this. You can work soil amendments into your garden, such as fertilizers or compost, and another strategy to replenish soil nutrients is crop rotation. First of all, let's talk about compost. A compost bin isn't just a pile of rotting plants. It's a mixture of high-carbon brown materials like dried leaves, straw, shredded newspaper, and high-nitrogen green materials like grass clippings and weeds that haven't gone to seed, and leftover scraps from your garden. Word to the wise, use compost for plant scraps and avoid putting animal bones, meat waste, or oils into the compost. With enough compost, you may not need any additional fertilizers, but it's important to understand how they work in case you do need them. You can mix water-soluble fertilizers with water and pour them into the soil. You can often apply granular fertilizers to the top of the soil. Because each fertilizer is different, you need to read the directions and follow them carefully. When choosing a fertilizer, make sure that it's appropriate for an edible garden. Another easy, cost-effective strategy to maintain nutrients in your soil is crop rotation. Using this strategy, you'll rotate which crop you plant in each spot every season. Rotating among root crops that break up soil, legumes that add nitrogen to the soil, leafy greens to take advantage of the nitrogen, and finally a fruit like tomatoes. This technique is often used to prevent the buildup of pests or disease and also to prevent erosion. But you can also use it to make sure that plants work together to keep the soil healthy. While there's nothing glamorous or exciting about soil, and your neighbors aren't going to walk by your gardens and say, "Wow, what great soil you have," they are going to notice how great your plants are and the kind of harvest that you enjoy because of the time and energy that you invested in producing great soil full of nutrients to grow wonderful plants. The information that I shared in this segment of The Amateur Gardener today was taken from a Gale course that I've been doing online at the Belleville Public Library. It's called Start Your Own Edible Garden, and the source of the information comes from the lady running this course, Katie Powell Lee.